For the inverse, Apple hosts an event called the Worldwide Developers Conference every year in June. During these events, they always announce updates related to the many softwares that run their systems, such as iOS, iPadOS, macOS, watchOS, tvOS, and recently visionOS as well. Outside of this, they also like to use this event to talk about any other major projects. This usually comes with some kind of hardware-related announcement as well. For example, in 2020, Apple announced that they would be transitioning their Macs from the Intel CPUs to Apple-made silicon. In 2022, they provided an update to this transition program, but they also announced the M2 MacBook Air, which featured a major design overhaul compared to the M1 version. In 2023, they announced the Apple Vision Pro, which was their take on the AR/VR headset. So following in that tradition, Apple also announced the Worldwide Developers Conference 2025, which will take place during the week of June 9th. Now, most of the public-facing announcements will take place during the day of the 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and anyone across the globe who wishes to attend can attend through a live stream which will be hosted on YouTube, but also on Apple's native website. Now, every tech event like this, from a major tech company like Apple, is always prefaced by countless leaks, rumors, and predictions. So following in those footsteps, let's also put in our predictions and expectations for this event. Now, before we begin, let's give WWDC a nickname. We'll call it Dub Dub, or Dub Dub 25, instead of WWDC 2025 every time. Admittedly, this is a direct inspiration from the Marques Brownlee channel, and by the way, if you haven't heard of him or his team, go check them out, because they are an amazing channel that makes amazing videos about all things tech. Amazing people, amazing work. Now let's begin with Dub Dub 25. Let's begin with Vision Pro. Now for the 3.0 update, there isn't much coverage other than the fact that this one is supposed to be major. For reference, visionOS 2.0 came in under a year from the launch of Vision Pro and therefore was minor. In comparison to that, this time Apple has had more time to develop a more substantial update. The only thing that's really being talked about is the ability to interact with the interface with just your eyes. Currently, the system requires your eyes and also the top of your fingers. This change could enhance the already magical experience that is using the Vision Pro. However, the execution and universal application of this feature will be important to deliver that experience to the end user. Other than features that are coming natively to visionOS, the system also happens to be a fairly significant influence this year. As I've already mentioned, Apple announced the Vision Pro in 2023. Their intention at the time was to make that their next generation of computing technology. And although the launch didn't go exactly as it was planned, it seems that there's something about the software, visionOS, that has attracted developers. So in a move to bring unity across the ecosystem, Apple is taking some design elements from the visionOS and it's bringing it to all of its other systems, in what will be a major design overhaul. Other than visionOS, Apple also seems to be inspired by glass textures and sunlight. For this reason, they've named this redesigned UI Solarium, which is a room that allows for a lot of sunlight through its glass windows. Next, let's talk about iPadOS. Now, it is safe to say that the iPad will be included in the Solarium redesign. Besides this, there are two features that are expected exclusively for the iPad. The first one is a menu bar, which would function similar to the Mac menu bar, effectively moving forward and bridging the gap between the Mac and iPad experience. The second one is a 2.0 version of Stage Manager, a feature that debuted on the iPad in 2022 as a part of iPadOS 16. Now, There aren't a lot of details about what this 2.0 version will entail, other than it being a smoother and more productive experience moving in between apps and windows. It is a little confusing how Apple's going to position this though, because in order to make the iPad more compelling, Apple needs to make the iPad almost act as an alternative of the Mac. And this update seems to be doing exactly that. However, Apple also can't entirely jump into the deep end, because that'll eat into their Mac sales. These half-hearted attempts to make the iPad more compelling usually end up disappointing because the software can't take the full advantage of iPad's overpowered hardware. We've been seeing this push and pull between the iPad and the Mac since 2018, ever since Apple announced the full-screen iPad Pro and iPadOS. It will be interesting to see how Apple plays this balancing game. But before I ramble far too long, this could be an entire video of its own, and let me know if that's something you'd be interested in seeing. But next, on with the Mac. Here, it does seem like we have more information as to exactly what the Solarium UI will look like. Quote unquote, we can expect to see a complete refresh of icons, menus, and system buttons, new window styles and management systems, a simpler navigation system, and more translucent interface elements. But besides this, according to my sources, there isn't a lot of exclusivity coming to Mac this year, besides a few accessibility features. Now, it is entirely possible that none of these features have actually leaked to us yet, but essentially the Mac will be inheriting the vehicle motion cues feature from the iPhone, which will reduce motion sickness and make it easier to use your device in a moving vehicle. And last but certainly not the least, there is always speculation about what macOS will be called every year, and a few names that have been used in the past are Catalina, Big Sur, Monterey, Ventura, Sonoma, and Sequoia. And a few names that could show up this year could be things like California, Condor, Diablo, Grizzly, Fairlawn, so on and so forth. However, according to a few select sources, there is speculation that the name this year will be called macOS Tahoe, named after the Lake Tahoe in California. But I guess we won't have any confirmation until we see it in the event on Monday. iOS 19. Now, I personally was not expecting this year to be a big iOS year because 18 also kind of felt like a big update. However, I am looking forward to what they'll bring with Solarium. Apple really hasn't messed with the iOS design component since number 7 when they got rid of all of the skeuomorphism. Skeuomorphism, by the way, is designing an interface to look how it would in real life. For instance, designing your Notes application to look like an actual notepad, designing the Safari app to look like an actual compass, designing your Compass app to look like an actual compass. You get the point. Some updates we can look forward to include a redesigned camera app and an easier way for you and your party to connect with public Wi-Fi networks. However, as most of us are probably expecting, a lot of the features at this event will probably be geared towards Apple Intelligence or artificial intelligence. For instance, one source rumors that there's going to be an AI-powered battery feature that is supposed to extend your battery life by optimizing the power draw of certain applications and features based on your usage pattern. Another feature is an AI doctor built into the Health app that can provide recommendations to improve your well-being based on information that it collects from the phone and its connected devices. As far as watchOS and tvOS go, we don't have a lot of information other than the Solarium redesign also coming to these systems. Details don't go too far beyond this, but I guess for watchOS we know that their design will cover icons, menus, and buttons, but not much else. One more thing, it is entirely possible that the naming convention is going to change this year. There is news going around that these systems will not be called OS 19 or OS 12 or whatever the next consecutive version is. Instead, all of them will be called OS 26. And the logic behind this is to name the systems after the year that is going to follow the current one. And according to this convention, next year we can expect to see OS 27 and then OS 28 the year after that. And I'm not really sure what the point behind doing this is or why it's 1 year ahead, but it is what it is. About Apple Intelligence and a smarter Siri. I had been vaguely following the story since Apple launched Apple Intelligence back at WWDC, and I do know that Apple Intelligence was kind of half-baked and some of the promised and really well marketed for did not result in practical usage. But as I was doing more detailed research for this video, this is what I found out. Essentially, in 2022, OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and this caught the attention of Craig Federighi, who is the Senior Vice President of Software Engineering at Apple. And he started to reach out to other companies and other people who had already started development on their own AI models to learn more about it. And he also made it a very clear point to tell his own development team to pack as many AI-powered features into iOS 18 as possible. And that's exactly what they did. At WWDC, Apple announced a lot of AI-powered iOS 18 features. In fact, they actually branded their own version of artificial intelligence called Apple Intelligence. And alongside this, they announced a smarter Siri. Now, after they were announced, some of these features were missing in action and some others were delayed until December 2024. And this resulted in a lawsuit against Apple accusing them of, quote unquote, aggressively marketing for Apple Intelligence features that did not exist at the time of promotion and some that still don't exist today. An example of such a feature that still doesn't exist would be a smarter Siri. On top of this, communication between the marketing and development teams was poor, which resulted in Apple having to pull down ads for features that were still way too buggy or nowhere close to being ready. And while I could go on and on about the eventual drama that pursued at Apple, to cut long stories short, there is now a team working to develop an AI-powered Siri based on an entirely native architecture instead of trying to integrate a legacy architecture with new code. And as far as talking about Siri at WWDC goes, I definitely think that Siri is going to take a backseat at this event because apparently there are a lot of features that are still in development, and so there's really not much to talk about / announce. And because Apple Intelligence is actually contagious to the negative press that surrounds a smarter Siri, Apple will actually try to create separation between the two brands so that they can independently carry on with Apple Intelligence and wait to talk about a smarter Siri when that is fully developed. And now let's talk about hardware, because as I mentioned previously, it is possible that some hardware is announced at this event, as previous WWDCs have also had hardware-related announcements. Mac. Now, it is typical for the ultra-high-end chips to lag behind their entry to mid-level counterparts. With that being said, it is possible for us to see an M4 Ultra at this event, as the M4 Regular and M4 Pro have already been announced and released since last year. And to go along with this M4 Ultra, we could also see the next iteration of the Mac Pro. Next, let's talk about something that's more of an off-the-cuff prediction, which do occasionally occur in real life. For example, the Apple Vision Pro was quite a surprise when it came at WWDC. And for this year, it is possible that Apple announces their AI glasses, which are slated for a late 2026 release. That would make it kind of an early announcement, but still possible, especially given that Google also announced their AI glasses at this year's I/O, so Apple could try to keep up with the competition with this announcement. Now, take all of what I say with a grain of salt, because keep in mind that all of this information is based on preliminary research and predictions and leaks, and based on past patterns from past events. But none of this will actually be in confirmation until we see it in the event on Monday. And when we do, I'll be sure to come back and then we can talk all about it. But until then, my name is Manit Jindal, and this has been Narratives. Thank you for watching. let's begin. Nope, we're not doing this crap. We're not doing this. Which was for this event.